Alien Queen wanted to serve herself to human, but human chose homeless and abandoned alien woman. Soreliskar was beautiful only from orbit. On the surface, it was silent, bitter, and deadly. Temperatures dropped low enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Wind carried fine shards of ice that sliced through unprotected eyes and lips. But on this day, a crowd had gathered, wrapped in luxury furs, cloaks lined with heat-threaded mesh, and boots reinforced against the cold. The Frostblood Tournament was a tradition older than most of the off-world colonies orbiting the region. Meant originally to determine succession and status among the Frostblood castes, it had become a spectacle. Warriors fought for prestige, for rewards, for the queen. Kevin Thorne had no interest in any of that. He wasn't supposed to be in the tournament at all. He was an engineer, 34, ex-military, discharged after a collapsed power array took most of his left leg. The cybernetic replacement was crude but solid. He had come to Soreliskar as a systems consultant, one of many Terran specialists contracted to inspect the failing infrastructure beneath the capital's glacial plate. He should have been in a subthermal shaft, checking for stress fractures. Instead, he had stepped into the ring 4 nights ago when a fellow human, a hydrologist from Mars Tech, had been assaulted in the preparation pits by a frost blood guard. The guard saw all off-worlders as weak, disposable. Kevin had cracked the guard's jaw, got arrested, and been given a choice: take the punishment or fight to earn his place. He had fought, and then fought again, and again, until he had no choice but to finish it. Now he stood alone in the final ring. His breathing was slow but labored. The cold helped dull the bruises, but it also slowed his reflexes. Muscles ached. His armor, black thermal mesh and reinforced ceramic plating, was scorched at the shoulders and dinted along the ribs. His right glove was slick with dry blood. One knee clicked with every step. He'd taken down opponents twice his size, aliens bred for war, ones who trained since childhood. But this fight wasn't about winning anymore. It hadn't been for days. Now, it was about walking away with his spine intact. A bell rang out. Hollow. Final. Above him, the platform lights ignited in sequence, casting a sterile white glow over the arena. The crowd hushed. Queen Zeraline descended from her throne. Her appearance was calculated, just like everything else about her. Her body was nearly bare, only veiled in thin, sheer crystalline silk that clung to her skin and left her chest, hips, and most of her back exposed. Her blue skin shimmered under the lights, free of blemish or imperfection. Her crimson hair had been styled into a multi-tiered braid, woven with frost gems that sparkled with every movement. The ceremonial walk was silent. No guards, no fanfare, just her descending the steps, moving with the control of someone used to being watched, used to being wanted. Kevin's eyes tracked her only briefly. He was already thinking about exit routes, about how soon they'd let him leave, about how fast he could get back to the outpost and file his final report. His job here was done. "You stand victorious," Zeraline said. Her voice was low, steady, and by ancient right, you are owed your reward. She stepped closer. One hand reached up, unhooking the clasp of her robe. The wind caught it slightly, revealing more of her body. Her expression never changed. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't eager. This was routine, political, expected. Kevin felt a flicker of unease. Not revulsion, just discomfort. This whole ceremony felt wrong. Cold, clinical, like she was offering herself not as a person, but as a transaction, as a symbol of her own power. It wasn't seduction. It was theater, and he wanted no part of it. He shifted slightly, his eyes scanning past the queen toward the outer ring of the arena. Something had moved, or rather, someone. A figure sat in the snow near the edge of the Colosseum's wall, half-shadowed by one of the frost-carved support pillars. She was small, curled in on herself, skin the same hue as the queen's, pale blue with a sickly tinge. Her red hair was tangled and unadorned, falling in matted strands across her face. Her dress, if it could still be called that, was torn ceremonial silk, shredded at the seams, stained from the ice and dirt. She wasn't wearing shoes. Her bare legs were scraped. Her wrists were bruised, and she was shivering violently. Kevin felt his stomach tighten. She wasn't part of the audience. She wasn't even being acknowledged. No one looked her way. It was as if she didn't exist. But Kevin saw her, and in the way she clutched herself, in the way her eyes stayed low, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, he saw something real. Something the Queen's performance lacked. He took a step forward, not toward the throne, toward the woman. The Queen's voice cut sharply. "You mistake the ritual. You will come forward." He ignored her. With each step, the noise in the arena changed. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Words were spoken, too fast to catch, in dialects he didn't understand. He kept moving. She was barely conscious. Her lips were cracked. Her fingers blue. She looked up just once, a flicker of dull recognition in her eyes, and then flinched away, as if expecting to be struck. Kevin dropped to one knee. He pulled off his cloak, thick survival weave, still warm from his body, and wrapped it carefully around her shoulders. She jerked at the contact, but he was gentle, slow. Her breathing hitched. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, raw. He didn't answer. He slid his arms under her legs and back, lifted her into his arms. She didn't resist. She didn't help either. Her weight sagged against him, light as a child, bones sharp under skin. Shouts rang out. The Queen's command echoed. "Seize him!" Boots crashed against the ice. Kevin turned, cloak flaring with the wind, and started down the slope of the arena's exit channel. It wasn't a run. Not yet. But it would be. He had made his decision, one formed not from impulse, but from something deeper. Something anchored in years of seeing people ignored. Used. Broken. He hadn't come here to be a hero. He had come here to repair a failing system. But now, for the first time, he saw what was truly broken. And he wasn't going to leave it behind. Kevin moved fast. The tunnel carved through the glacial wall wasn't made for escape. It was ceremonial, narrow, open to the wind, slick with ice beneath worn boot grooves. He adjusted his grip on the woman in his arms, trying to shield her bare legs from the worst of the cold as he pressed forward. She didn't speak again. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder, breath shallow against his neck. Behind them, voices rose, guards shouting in frost-cast dialects, boots slamming against stone, weapons charging up with a high-pitched hum that cut through the wind. Kevin didn't look back. He focused on the path ahead, down the stone-cut stairs, across the exposed landing, through the corridor leading to the outer tiers of the city. If he could reach the industrial access lifts before they shut down protocol, he might lose them. If not, he didn't think about that. Each step down the icy slope jolted the woman in his arms. Her breathing hitched once, barely audible, but she clung tighter to the cloak he had wrapped around her. She was trembling uncontrollably now, not from fear. Her body was shutting down. The access corridor came into view, wide, dark, sealed at the far end by a rust-streaked alloy gate. No guards, no nobles, just Kevin, the cold, and the blue-skinned woman he had chosen over a queen. He ducked inside the structure and moved quickly through the shadows, boots thudding against metal grates. Light flickered overhead, old bulbs, low charge, fed by backup cells. The deeper he went, the more the noise of the arena faded behind him. The woman stirred in his arms. "My name," she whispered. Kevin slowed. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were open now, just barely. She looked up at him, uncertain but not afraid. Leary," she said. Kevin gave a short nod. "Kevin, you're not one of them," she murmured. "No." He kept walking, breath clouding in the cold air. His mind was running ahead, calculating heat loss, tracking his route through the utility tunnels, remembering where the old Terratech transport pads used to be. They had been shut down months ago, but some still had limited battery life. Enough for one jump, maybe two, if he could power the core. Behind them, the hunt had started. The Queen's guards would be sweeping sectors, locking off exits, freezing down the lift controls. But the nobility weren't trained trackers. They expected him to run to the outskirts, maybe to a shuttle hangar. Kevin didn't plan to leave the city. Not yet. He entered an abandoned corridor that led beneath the arena's lower maintenance level. The walls were cracked. Condensation ran down exposed coolant pipes. The air here was warmer by a few degrees, enough to matter. He laid Leary down on a dry patch of insulated floor, quickly pulling off one of his thermal plates to tuck under her. He crouched beside her and opened his field kit, tearing a seal on an emergency heating pad and pressing it to her chest. She gasped at the sudden warmth. "Hold that," he said, steady but firm. "Don't let go. You'll feel sick first. That's normal." Her hands, blue and shaking, clutched the pad. Kevin unfastened the outer layer of her cloak to check her toes. Frostburn. Bad, but not beyond recovery. He wrapped them in the lining of his gloves and checked her fingers next. One knuckle had split. "You were left out there long," he muttered. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Her eyes had closed again. Kevin took a breath and sat back, finally still for the first time since the arena. His heart pounded beneath his chest plate. His legs ached. His hand throbbed from a fractured knuckle he hadn't had time to check. And now, sitting there in the half-dark with a half-frozen woman lying beneath his cloak, he had time to ask himself what the hell he was doing. He had just rejected a queen, in front of an entire cast. He'd broken an ancient tradition. He'd defied a public ceremony designed to honor victory and dominance, and instead knelt beside a discarded woman no one even remembered. Why? He hadn't thought it through. He hadn't needed to. He saw her. She was suffering, forgotten. And something in him, something raw and human, couldn't leave her there. Kevin had seen what systems did to the ones who stopped being useful. He'd watched soldiers discarded after injury, miners spaced for protest, colonists denied rations for missing quotas. Now he was watching it play out on a different planet with fancier words and colder skies. The mask of ritual didn't make it any less brutal. Footsteps echoed nearby. Kevin tensed. He rose silently, hand gripping the sidearm at his belt. One of the Queen's guards passed the opening above, didn't spot him. Kevin waited, breathing through his nose, slow and controlled. Once the sound faded, he turned back to Leary. She was watching him, fully awake now, eyes clear if glassy. "Are you going to trade me?" she asked softly. Kevin's jaw tightened. "No." Her expression didn't change right away, but her fingers curled tighter around the cloak. "I was promised," she said, "to a house, a noble one. When I refused, they stripped my name, took my file, told everyone I was defective. Training failure." Kevin said nothing. "I stayed near the arena," she continued, voice flat. "No one told me to leave. I thought maybe they'd forget to see me, and maybe I'd stop existing." He crouched again, slowly, and offered her water from a thermal flask. She drank in short, desperate swallows. "They did forget you," he said quietly. "But I didn't." Leary looked down. A long silence followed. Kevin pulled his pack close and began checking his route forward. If he could bypass the lift system, reach the Terratech substation on the lower east edge, there might be shelter, maybe even working communications. He stood again. "Can you walk?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. He helped her up, one arm under hers, letting her lean fully. She was unsteady, but her weight had returned. Her eyes stayed forward now. "Stay close," he said, "and stay quiet." Leary followed. Together, they stepped deeper into the forgotten underbelly of the frozen city, leaving the throne, the crowd, and the cold ritual behind. The real war hadn't even started. The tunnels grew tighter as Kevin led them deeper into the maintenance underworks. Less traveled, less mapped, forgotten by most since the Queen's court shifted above ground. The cold lingered here, but didn't bite. Pipes ran overhead, leaking faint hisses of warmth from their aging thermal coils. They cast a dim, amber glow on the walls, enough to move without full lamps. Leary walked beside him now, slow but steady. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the junction chamber. She leaned on the wall at times, pausing to catch her breath, but she didn't complain. Kevin glanced at her now and then, noting the small changes, the clearer eyes, the steadier legs, the way she gripped the cloak tighter around herself whenever the corridor widened. She was still scared, still silent, but she was moving. That meant something. He stopped near a sealed maintenance hatch, waved his hand over the rusted console, and knelt beside the panel. He pried it open with a multi-tool and began rerouting the faded circuit lines with practiced precision. As he worked, he spoke low, mostly to fill the silence. There's a tech substation 2 levels down. TerraTech built it back before the Frostbloods kicked the consortium out. Should be mostly stripped, but the core relays might still be active. Enough to power comping, or maybe even a shield cycle. Leary's voice was quiet behind him. You're going to call for extraction? Kevin paused, hands still in the wiring. He answered without turning. Eventually, but not yet. Why? Because if I trigger an extraction now, they'll lock the upper city and trace it back to this zone. The Queen's security net won't miss a Terran distress call. He turned, looked at her. I get one shot to do this clean. She met his eyes for a moment, then looked down. You're still thinking like a soldier. I'm still alive because of that. She didn't argue. Kevin finished the bypass, and the hatch unlocked with a hiss of warm air. They stepped into a utility access lift barely large enough for two. He keyed it to descend manually. No network, no beacon, just gravity and hope. As the lift hummed downward, he leaned against the wall. His arms ached. His ribs were bruised from the earlier fight. He could feel one of his lower teeth was loose. But more than the pain, it was the questions gnawing at the edge of his mind. What exactly had they done to her? Why had no one spoken her name? Why would a system so obsessed with breeding and presentation discard someone like Leary, who clearly had the appearance they prized? He didn't ask her yet. She wasn't ready. The lift clanked to a stop. Doors slid open onto a wide, dark chamber that smelled of old coolant and synthetic dust. Most of the panels were cracked. A few hummed with standby power. Kevin motioned for her to stay, close as he moved across the debris-strewn floor. A row of backup terminals sat embedded in the wall. He powered one up, slow boot, faint flicker. But it worked. He activated an internal scan of the nearby systems, locking down any traceable signals. The results returned fast. No movement in the lower corridors. No active heat signatures nearby. The guard search teams hadn't reached this level yet. Kevin exhaled slow. We're safe. For now. He turned to see Leary standing still, arms crossed under the cloak. She wasn't shaking anymore. She stared at the console, then at him. You're not what I expected, she said finally. Not the first time I've heard that, Kevin replied. What did you expect? A man who wanted the Queen's bed. Not this. Her voice didn't hold sarcasm or flattery. Just confusion. Why throw away power for someone like me? He looked at her carefully. She was serious. You think you're less than her? He asked. I was trained to serve nobles, she said quietly. To be chosen. I was told if I didn't accept a breeder contract by my 25th cycle, I'd be reclassified. And then I said no. I thought it would be a negotiation. Instead, I lost my caste, my title, even my name. They changed my records. Called me defective. Kevin stepped closer. And no one stood up for you? No one looks at someone who's been erased. She hesitated. Until you did. He didn't answer right away. He reached for the medical kit and gestured toward a stack of reinforced crates near the back of the room. Sit. Let me check your feet. Leary obeyed. She didn't flinch this time when he knelt in front of her and unwrapped the makeshift bandages. The skin was blistered, raw in places but not blackened. He applied a heating gel, wrapped her toes in thermoplast mesh, and sealed the layers gently. You'll need proper recovery time, he said. I'll survive. Kevin met her eyes. That's not the goal. You don't just survive anymore. You get to live. Leary's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. He stood, walked to the console again, and connected his wrist pad to the dormant relay grid. One jump link at a time, he began mapping routes to an old smuggler's run beneath the glacier's eastern edge. There was an exfil drop point there. He'd used it once before, years ago, during his recon contract days. If it was still functional, they could disappear. Leary sat quietly for a while, watching him work. Then, after several minutes, they'll kill you for what you did. They'll try. And me. Kevin glanced at her. If I let them take you back, what happens? She looked away. That's what I thought. He closed the panel and walked over, crouching beside her again. I'm going to get you out. I don't know what comes next, but if you stay here, you vanish. I'm not letting that happen." Her eyes welled with something, uncertainty, maybe disbelief. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "I don't remember the last time someone spoke to me like I was still real." Kevin didn't say anything. He reached forward, adjusted the cloak to sit higher on her shoulders, then rested one gloved hand lightly over hers. The contact made her flinch, but only for a second. Then she let it stay. They sat there, still and silent, under failing lights and steel-bent shadows. Outside the substation, the hunt would continue. Drones would scan the upper levels. Patrols would question witnesses. The Queen would rage behind glass walls and demand his head. But none of that mattered here. Here, in the forgotten dark, something had shifted. Kevin wasn't just running anymore. He had someone to protect. The relay grid shorted, just after Kevin rerouted the final jump link. A small spark jumped from the console, followed by a burnt metal smell. He yanked his hand back, cursed under his breath, then quickly silenced the terminal. Too much power drawn too fast. He hadn't accounted for the cold decay in the substation's backup cells. They had one chance now, one route, and no way to mask it after the first move. He turned toward Leary. She was seated where he'd left her, legs tucked beneath the cloak, her hands wrapped tightly around a ration flask he'd warmed and handed her earlier. She looked better, less ghost, more person. But there was still a caution in her eyes, as if she was constantly bracing for someone to tear her back into silence. Kevin crossed the room and crouched beside her. "The path's active," he said. "We move now, or we don't move at all." Leary nodded. No hesitation. She didn't ask for reassurance. She didn't ask where they were going. Just trusted him. He didn't know what to make of that. He helped her up again. She leaned on him naturally now, her weight less of a burden than before. She was warmer, more alert. "Do you remember the tunnels under the merchant district?" he asked as they walked. "Old transit line, frozen over since the colony backed out of rail funding." "I remember being told not to go near them," she said quietly. "They said they were unstable, dangerous." Kevin allowed himself a faint smile. Perfect. They moved through the substation's rear access door, stepped into a tight corridor of metal beams and exposed conduits. Kevin kept his weapon drawn, sweeping corners, checking shadows. Leary stayed just behind him, close but quiet. Her bare feet now wrapped in layers of salvaged insulation, her breath steady. It wasn't until they passed through a collapsed bulkhead and into the hollowed-out ice passage beneath the industrial core that Leary finally broke the silence. "Kevin," she said, "do you know what they called me? Before they erased me." He slowed but didn't stop. "Tell me." "Vaylina. My bond name. My real one. I gave it up when I refused the contract. They made me burn the seal. Then they gave me Leary, meant for the silent. It's what they assign when they want you forgotten." Kevin didn't speak right away. "That name's not theirs anymore," he said eventually. "It's yours. Keep it if you want it. Or change it when you're ready." She was quiet after that, but her hand lightly touched his back as they walked, barely a brush of fingers through fabric. He didn't move away. 15 minutes later, they reached the edge of the abandoned rail line. It was pitch black beyond the maintenance hatch, save for the thin amber light leaking from his shoulder lamp. The tunnel stretched downward in a tight arc, lined with frost-covered tracks and rusted control poles. Fissures cut through some of the ice, leading down into glacial runoff channels. Somewhere in the distance, a mechanical hum vibrated through the walls, steady, growing louder. Kevin froze. "Drone," he said immediately. He turned off the lamp. "Get down," he whispered, pulling her behind a collapsed pipe structure. They crouched in the dark, silent except for their breath. The drone passed above, an angular, wingless model with thermal sweep sensors blinking along its undercarriage. It moved slow, deliberate, scanning heat signatures across the abandoned tunnel. It hovered for a moment, then moved on. Kevin stayed still for another full minute before finally exhaling. "They've widened the search grid," he muttered. "They're guessing we dropped underground. Won't they trace the power spike?" Leary asked. He nodded. "Eventually." She studied him, barely visible in the dark. "Why are you still doing this?" "I told you. You could have left already. Let them take me. Said you didn't know me." Kevin didn't look at her. I don't walk away from people who were thrown out like trash. He stood, extended a hand. Come on. The drone's headed south. That gives us a window. They moved faster now, cutting across an old cargo ramp and into a decompression chamber that hadn't sealed in decades. The air smelled stale. The floor vibrated faintly under Kevin's boots. The generator still pulsed somewhere beneath the glacier's crust. They reached a side door with a faint orange stripe still visible on its frame. Kevin pried it open with a mechanical grunt and waved Leary through. The room inside was small, shielded, cold but dry. He turned and slammed the door shut. That's when he heard the echo. A boot. Not his. Not hers. The sound came from the tunnel behind them. He cursed and dropped into a crouch. Weapon up. Finger on the trigger. Leary crouched behind a thermal conduit, eyes wide. Then came the voice. Filtered. Calm. Thorn. You know this is pointless. Kevin recognized it immediately. Commander Devrin of the Frostblood Praetors, one of Zeraline's highest-ranking enforcers. You disgraced her, Devrin called out. But the Queen is merciful. Return the defective and submit. You'll be punished, yes, but not executed. Kevin didn't answer. Devrin's voice sharpened. You're not from here, Terran. You don't understand what she is, what she allows to live. You think this is just about a woman? This is about order, structure, balance. Kevin said nothing. He turned to Leary. There's a hatch in the floor under that panel. You go first. Crawl until it curves. Don't stop. What about you? She asked. I'll follow. But he didn't move yet. She hesitated, then nodded. She crossed the room, pulled open the floor panel, and slipped inside. Kevin waited 2 more seconds. Then he stepped into the open, aimed his weapon, and fired into the dark. A blinding flash of red plasma burst through the tunnel, striking the ceiling above Devrin's voice. A crack followed. Ice began falling. Kevin didn't wait. He dropped into the hatch and sealed the panel behind him, sliding into the narrow crawl space just as the impact echoed through the walls above. It bought them time. Not much, but enough. He caught up to Leary halfway through the crawl passage. She turned toward him. Her face was flushed, eyes wet, breath quick. You came, she whispered. Of course I did. They kept moving, hands scraping ice, backs hunched, the crawl space narrowing around them. Far behind, the tunnel above collapsed. But ahead, the cold thinned, and light, faint, natural light, bled in from the far end. The tunnel ended in a shattered ventilation shaft carved into the edge of the glacier's outer crust. Kevin pushed the hatch open and immediately felt the cold slam into his face like a wall. Not just freezing, hostile. Wind howled across the ridge above them, whipping snow sideways in dense, blinding waves. Visibility dropped to a few meters. Every exposed surface froze within seconds. This wasn't the city anymore. This was open Sureliskar, the unforgiving wild. Kevin turned and reached down into the crawl space. Leary was already climbing, her breath shaky, face pale again despite the warmth they'd built in the tunnels. He pulled her up fast, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and slammed the hatch closed behind them. The air outside was sharp enough to cut inside his throat. They were standing on the rim of a ravine, jagged, uneven, all ice and fractured stone. Above, a ridge climbed toward a craggy outcropping where the abandoned transport rails used to run. Below, cliffs fell away into frozen fog. There were no lights, no sensors, just wind, snow, and silence. Kevin pointed toward a hollowed rock face about 60 meters ahead. We make for that cleft. It's cover. Leary didn't argue. She nodded once and leaned into his side as they moved forward. Every step was a battle. Snow dragged at their legs. Ice slicked every surface. Leary slipped twice, catching herself on his arm. Kevin's knee screamed with every downhill jolt. He kept his head low and focused on her weight against his shoulder, her breath against his ribs. When they finally reached the cleft, Kevin ducked them both inside. The rock face sheltered them from the worst of the wind. The inside was shallow, but dry. Abandoned supply crates, long since rusted out, sat half-buried under drift. He kicked one open and found a sealed ration cylinder and 2 thermal fuel rods, still viable. Not much, but enough. He struck the fuel rod and set it between them. The heat flared to life, dull orange, flickering against the walls of the alcove. It wasn't cozy, but it wasn't death. Leary collapsed beside it, drawing the cloak tight. Her face was red from windburn. Her lips chapped. Her hands trembled again. But she was alive. Awake. Kevin dropped to one knee across from her, shaking warmth back into his fingers. Then he pulled a canister from his pack and handed it over. Drink. All of it. She did. Slowly. Her hands shook less after the second sip. Neither of them spoke for a while. The wind howled outside, covering the sky with a constant, grinding roar. Kevin rested his head against the cold stone behind him, breathing through his fatigue, trying to process how far they'd come. From an arena full of blood and tradition to this. You could have left, she said again, quietly. I didn't want to. I don't mean now. I mean when I told you what I used to be. He opened his eyes. She wasn't looking at him, but she wasn't hiding anymore either. I've seen systems eat people alive, he said. You're not broken. They are. Leary's lips tightened like she didn't quite believe him, but she didn't argue either. The silence returned. This time it felt heavier. After a while, she shifted closer to the heat. I trained for 10 years to become property. Kevin's brow furrowed. What do you mean? They called it service. But it was a program. We were taught to speak in certain tones. To be quiet when not spoken to. We were weighed. Injected. Rated. She paused. Then I turned 25 and refused the breeder bond. I said I wanted to study atmospheric systems instead. I liked how weather worked. They erased me that same week. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Let her say it her way. I stayed near the old servant quarters for a while. Slept under grates. Ate ration frost. Her throat bobbed. But I never thought anyone would touch me without hurting. Kevin leaned forward slightly. Then maybe that changes now. She blinked at him, searching his face for the lie. When she didn't find one, her shoulders lowered, barely. Her fingers, still red, reached slightly toward the fire and then hesitated. Kevin noticed. He reached forward slowly and opened his glove palm just a few inches from the flame. She mirrored him. Their fingers didn't touch, but the heat between them was more than the rod could generate. It was shared presence. Voluntary. Real. Then movement. Kevin's eyes snapped to the cave's mouth. A shape passed just beyond the wind. Tall, cloaked, deliberate. Then another. Black armor. Frost glass masks. Royal Scouts. Kevin flattened himself instinctively. His pulse kicked up, fast and sharp. He reached toward Leary, one hand on her shoulder, guiding her into stillness. Outside, boots crunched over snow. Slow. Methodical. Kevin reached for his sidearm, eased it from its holster in silence. He glanced at Leary. She was completely still, pressed into the rock, breath held. Her eyes found his in the dim light. They weren't afraid. They were ready. The scout paused at the edge of the cleft. The wind howled again, louder now. Loose snow blew past in thick sheets. The scout turned, as if scanning, then stepped away. Gone. Kevin held his breath 5 more seconds. Then 10. Then slowly relaxed. Leary exhaled shakily. Then, for the first time, reached out, not for warmth or survival, but to rest her hand over his. A real touch. Not because she had to, because she chose to. He looked at her. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just stayed there, hand resting over his glove, eyes calm. And for a moment, in a dead world of ice and cruelty, something alive sparked between them. They weren't just fugitives now. They were becoming something else. Something together. The wind never stopped. It screamed over the glacier with teeth, dragging snow in endless sheets across the open ground. Visibility had dropped to almost nothing. Just cold and white, and the occasional flash of black rock breaking through the frost. Kevin kept his head down, one hand gripping the fabric at Leary's back, guiding her forward through the storm. She moved beside him, wrapped in both the cloak and a salvaged thermal shroud, breathing hard but steady. The cold burned their faces, their fingers, their lungs. But they kept walking. There was no other choice. The coordinates Kevin had plotted back in the substation pointed them toward the old Terratech relay bunker, a deep shelter dug under the eastern ice cliffs before the corporation pulled out. It wasn't on any royal grid, but if the entrance was still intact, it might hold power, food, even a signal relay, or might be buried. They wouldn't know until they got there. Kevin's knee was failing. Every few steps, it locked or jolted. His vision blurred once from a sudden wave of pain. He grit his teeth and pushed through it. They had less than 2 kilometers to go. A thin crevasse cut through the ice in their path, 30 meters across, maybe more. Kevin spotted the frozen bridge, an old cargo hauler's frame, rusted and buried in snow, stretched across the gap like a dead skeleton. He scanned both directions. No safer route. He turned to Leary, voice sharp over the wind. "We cross here. Fast. Don't stop. Stay low." She nodded once. No hesitation. Kevin went first, boots crunching onto the metal struts. The frame groaned under his weight. He moved quick, knees bent, distributing his steps. The wind screamed harder at the center, trying to knock him sideways. But he made it, turned, held out his hand. Leary followed. She was light, barefoot again under her wrappings, weight distributed naturally as if she'd done this before. Halfway across, the metal cracked beneath her. She froze. "Don't stop," Kevin shouted. She moved again. She reached him. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her in. The bridge snapped behind her with a sound like a gunshot, metal tearing away into the ravine below. They didn't speak, just stared at each other, breathless. Then they ran. It wasn't far now. The ridge flattened, the snow thinned, and finally Kevin spotted it, a round indentation half covered in drift. A hatch, the old outpost dome. He dropped to his knees, scraping snow away with bare hands until the emergency lock glowed dim red. Still active. He slammed his fist onto the seal pad. The door opened with a sluggish, grinding motion. Warm air hit them, faint, recycled, but enough to burn their lungs after so long in the cold. They stumbled inside. The hatch closed behind them. Darkness. Then low orange lighting flickered on, revealing a curved interior barely larger than a bunker tent. Collapsed shelves, stripped rations, emergency heaters blinking standby. Kevin collapsed onto the nearest crate. His leg finally gave out. He groaned, removed his helmet, and exhaled long and hard. Leary fell beside him. The cloak slipped down, revealing her flushed face, frostbitten lips, and wind-burned cheeks. Her eyes were glassy, but focused. She looked at him. Really looked. "You're hurt," she said. "Just tired." She shook her head. "Your side." He glanced down. Blood. A shallow gash across his ribs. One he hadn't felt until now. Probably from earlier. Maybe shrapnel during the tunnel collapse. He waved it off. "I'll patch it." But she was already beside him, pulling the med kit from his pack, pressing him back into the wall. "Sit still." She worked fast, silent, focused. Cleaned the cut, sealed it with a warming patch, wrapped his torso with practiced hands. Kevin watched her face. Calm. Capable. "You've done this before." She didn't stop moving. "I saw enough girls left to bleed in the training dorms. Someone had to learn." He exhaled again. The pain was less now. The warmth of the bunker settled into his bones, even if the fatigue only grew heavier. "Kevin," she said quietly, "you should have left me." "No." "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. Something in his chest ached, tight and dull and harder to ignore now that they'd stopped moving. "I don't know," he said finally. "I just couldn't. I saw you there, and I couldn't." She stared at him for a long time, then reached up, slowly, deliberately, and touched his face. Just her fingertips brushing the side of his jaw. He didn't move. Her hand slid to the back of his neck, pulling his forehead gently against hers. Neither of them spoke. Then the emotion hit. It wasn't passion. It wasn't desperation. It was the weight of everything, every step, every breath, every choice. All of it crashing into him at once. Kevin let out a sound that wasn't quite a breath and wasn't quite a cry. He buried his face in her shoulder, and she held him. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. For a long time, they sat that way, pressed together on the cold floor of a dying dome, wrapped in silence and old heat and something new neither of them dared name. When Kevin finally pulled back, his eyes were red. He wiped them with the back of his glove, embarrassed. Leary didn't laugh, didn't look away. She leaned in and kissed him, not deep, not hungry, just warm, just real. She pulled back slowly, forehead resting against his again. "We're going to make it." Kevin nodded. He believed her. He reached for the emergency beacon, flipped the cover off, and activated the signal. A green light blinked. Help was coming, but so was the Queen. The signal beacon blinked green and steady, its pulse echoing faintly through the walls of the small dome. Outside, the wind had calmed, but only on the surface. The storm wasn't gone. It had simply changed shape. Kevin stood at the dome's threshold, weapons slung at his side, armor buckled but cracked. His side still ached. The wound was healing. Leary stood behind him, wrapped in the same cloak he'd first given her, though now it sat differently on her shoulders. She stood straighter, eyes forward, no longer silent. The sleek black skiff descended just after sunrise. No weapons extended, no guards marched, just a diplomatic skimmer, elegant and quiet, gliding through the white like a serpent. It landed 50 meters from the dome entrance. No sound but the settling of snow beneath its stabilizers. The hatch opened. Queen Zeraline stepped out alone. Her breath didn't fog in the air. Her attire was lined with environmental seals, subtle but flawless. A thin crystalline veil drifted behind her. Her red hair was braided again, tighter this time. Her posture radiated fury beneath a polished calm. No guards, no weapons drawn, just a single data crystal clasped in her hand. Kevin didn't move. Leary stepped up beside him. "You don't have to say anything," Kevin muttered quietly. "I know," she said, "but I want to." Zeraline stopped 10 paces from the dome. Her eyes scanned Kevin first, then settled coldly on Leary. "So the Queen said, this is how you intend to end your life. In the snow, clinging to a man who pities you." Leary took a step forward. Kevin started to move, but she touched his wrist gently. "I never asked for pity," she said calmly. Zeraline's eyes narrowed. "Then explain this performance." "There is no performance," Leary replied. "Just a choice. I chose him. I chose not to die beneath your throne. I chose my own name." "You have no name," the Queen hissed. "I do." Her voice sharpened. "It's Vaylina. You stole it from me once. You don't get to speak it again." Zeraline stepped forward, but the wind shifted. A second ship appeared above the horizon, sleek, silver, marked with Terran trade insignia. Civilian, media-affiliated. Its hull glinted under the faint light, and its sensor arrays swept over the skiff. Kevin exhaled. "I hit more than one signal when I powered that beacon," he said aloud. "Off-world media hubs still track Terratech systems. You came here to erase us quietly. Now you're being watched." Zeraline turned, saw the ship settling, its cameras rotating into position. Her face tightened. "You would throw away your lives for this?" "No," Kevin said. "We already took them back." The Queen stared at them both for a long, burning moment. Then she turned. No grand speech. No retaliation. Just silence. She walked back to the skiff and vanished inside. Moments later, the vessel lifted off. It disappeared into the pale sky, leaving only the slow fall of snow behind. Kevin didn't speak. He just looked at Leary. Her breath was visible now, calm, slow. Her body relaxed, shoulders square. For the first time, she wasn't bracing for what came next. She was already living in it. Weeks passed. The snow still fell, but now it was gentle, peaceful. It gathered on the edges of clean windows and melted on the solar-heated roof of a new dome. One built from repurposed colonial shells, reinforced, patched, and fitted with second-hand furniture from Terran shipping lanes. Inside, warmth filled the space. A real fire crackled in the low heater unit. Books lined the wall. Plants Kevin had smuggled in from his last contract stood in crates along the side. He sat on the floor, shirt half unbuttoned, boots off, legs stretched. Leary sat behind him on a woven mat, combing through his hair with quiet fingers. "You keep sitting like that," she murmured. "Your spine's gonna freeze up." "You keep touching me like that," he said, "and I don't care." She smiled. He turned to look at her. Her clothes were simple, gray thermal fabric, real stitching, sleeves rolled. Her red hair was loose. Her skin was clean, healthy, warm. Her wrists were no longer bruised. She looked like herself. Maybe for the first time. She leaned forward, resting her chin on his shoulder. I told the registry I wanted to take your name, she said. He froze. I didn't ask, she added gently. I told them. He turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. Valena Thorne, she said softly. Sounds like a future. He reached up, touched her cheek. You sure? I want a life with you. Not a rescue. Not a memory. A life. Her voice trembled. Let that be real. He nodded once. Then it's yours. They didn't kiss right away. They didn't need to. It wasn't about heat now. It wasn't survival. It was safety. Finally earned. And outside, the snow kept falling, soft, endless, indifferent to power or queens or broken names. Inside, warmth. Inside, love. The end.